So, cake is cake, but does it matter what cake to use for stacking? Well, the simple answer is yes, but it's a lot more nuanced than that, and I'll explain. Cake is definitely cake, but there are different types of cake to use. We're talking sponge cakes and mud cakes and everything else in between. I reference mud cakes and sponge cake because they are both different in texture, whereas sponge cakes are lighter in presentation, mud cakes are denser. Since there's not much context given to stacking here, I'm going to give you as much information about stacking a cake. Hopefully your question is answered and there's a bit more information for anything extra that may cover stacking. Now, if you're talking about stacking a single tiered cake, supposing it's not a super tall double barreled cake that has layers and layers towering down on it, even with structures in place, then perhaps there's not much thought to be given to the type of cake to use. That is if we're talking a 2-layered, 3-layered or 4-layered cake, a Genoese sponge, angel food cake, whatever. I think you will get the best outcome. But under the circumstance, whether you're stacking for a single tier or a double tier, 3-4 tiered cakes, it's probably important for you to give some thought to the type of cake you're going to be using, just so you can guarantee yourself some great outcomes for your stacking process. Having said that, you can get away with it if it's a single tiered cake because weight is not an issue here, but perhaps best outcome might be an objective to consider. Anything tiered, perhaps you want to consider the type of cake you're using for stacking, and I'll explain that because in tiered cakes you're having the weight of other tiers towering down on the bottom tier. It's a subject of science and gravity, so for that matter it's important to think about what cake will be on the bottom, in which case the best recommendation will be denser cakes and heavy layers that are able to absorb the weights that are coming down on it. If you stacked a Genoese sponge for a 3-tiered cake with a Genoese bean at the bottom, you're more likely to have structural issues and the cake possibly collapsing along the way, when especially you haven't considered the weight that the Genoese sponge is going to be taking, because Genoese is known to be very, very light. Also, if you're stacking a cake perhaps for carving, might perhaps be a good thing to consider denser cakes that will hold their form throughout the carving process to give you a better result as compared to a light textured cake that will fall apart if care is not considered throughout the process. So that's a long-winded way of saying yes, cake is cake. There are different types of cake, but for great outcomes you should perhaps consider the type of cake to use when stacking. Now the next question is, how much is too much when filling a cake with buttercream? There's no such thing as too much buttercream unless the buttercream filling is likely to cause you problems during the decorating process, or perhaps after decorating the cake it will create more problems for you when the cake comes to room temperature, or the cake is likely to become problematic under certain weather temperatures. And I will explain. Buttercream primarily is supposed to add taste and enhance the taste of your cake altogether. It also has the additional purpose of holding the cake layers together during the stacking process when the cake is left to chill. The buttercream then sets to hold the layers together, guaranteeing some stability in the process. Not all buttercreams are the same, I should say, but generally these are some of the uses of buttercream in the decorating process. With that said, some buttercream also, as stable as they can be, can help to achieve a level cake when filling and stacking. I say that by also mentioning not all buttercreams function the same in terms of profile and stability. However, consideration must be given to the amount of buttercream and even which buttercream is being used during the cake decorating process, because after filling and stacking a cake, at some point the cake is likely to come to room temperature, or perhaps might be kept under some difficult weather conditions. Even the most stable of buttercream will not survive in hot or extreme weather conditions, which is likely to melt, creating unstable cakes for you. And that is considering the extreme circumstances. Too much buttercream can create instability in cakes even at room temperature, whether it's a single or tiered cake. Sadly, there is no specific recommendation for how much buttercream should be used for cake, since objectives, goals and outcomes are different for different purposes during the decorating process. So my recommendation here is to consider your own circumstances, try a few things, fail fast, and determine what technique might probably work for you and how much buttercream you are likely to need when filling a cake. It goes without saying each project will require different elements, therefore different outcomes. So perhaps one cake that will require more buttercream might probably not be the same for another cake when customer preferences vary from person to person. I have had cakes on this particular channel where I have had too much buttercream, and in the summer conditions the cake has finally fallen flat and collapsed. Thankfully, I've been able to put it together. It has still not changed my attitude towards the amount of buttercream to use. However, it has taught me what adjustment I can make for better outcomes. So my recommendation is try your best, do what you can, and learn the best techniques to help you get better outcomes. But definitely there can't be such thing as too much buttercream unless perhaps it is creating problems for your decorating process or likely to create issues with the stability and structure of your cake. Third question is, what's the best buttercream to use? I only know how to make American buttercream. I can only answer this question based on the information I have available and from my own experience. There's no such thing as the best buttercream for any or all cakes, and I'll explain that in a moment. Having said that, the best buttercream you can use is the one you have perfected, gotten to know, is able to adapt under certain circumstances, and can flip it around to your circumstances, whatever it may be. The reason being, whilst there are so many buttercreams on the market, and yes, in terms of profiling the buttercreams, there are some that may stand better than the others. For instance, Italian and Ermine buttercreams are known for their stability and less than sweet status, and that also includes buttercreams like your Swiss meringue buttercreams amongst others. However, some of these buttercreams, as mentioned, are very technical to make and not so beginner friendly, so perhaps recommending those buttercreams to a beginner may not be for the best outcome for their circumstance, whereas American buttercream, which is easy to make, quite adaptable, and also able to absorb flavors very well, can also be very gritty and has very sweet mouth feel to it. Comparing the supposedly best ones that are very technical to make and this one that is easy to make, you can see where they both have advantages and disadvantages. However, there is no one specific buttercream that suits a particular cake on the same spectrum. I tend to favor Swiss or French meringue buttercream for reasons that I have explained now and again on this channel, but that is because it has taken me a couple of years to get comfortable with what works for me. Even so, one buttercream is not supposedly the best for all my cakes. There are different cakes that I pair with different buttercreams for different outcomes. So my best recommendation for you, or how to answer this question for your best outcome, is that whilst there are so many buttercreams on the market, some of which are better than the others, the best buttercream is the one you understand very well, understand the ingredient composition, the technique for making the buttercream, and one that you are able to adapt very well for your own circumstances. And when you do and get comfortable with your technique, process, and ingredients, you might be able to transition to other ones which you will have to learn and understand them very well for the outcomes that you are hoping for. I hope that answers your question.